Hello everyone. So in my previous video, I talked about some of the support structures that Sixes has in order to make the game more accessible and more playable for new players as well as, I guess returning players, although it's a weird term to have. And that's something I want, well, that's not something I want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about is where I think there's kind of some gaps, especially in the learning process, as well as just some thoughts on learning Sixes in general and what is kind of a priority or not. So, as I talked about, I said that, between, at least in North America, and again, if you're from like another scene and you want to share, what are the best like absolute beginner resources or just learning resources in general for your region, feel free to comment that, and I will absolutely try to collect those or combine those somewhere so people have it available. But anyway, as far as like the actual basic beginner stuff, between like newbie mixes or TF2 Coaching Central, stuff like that, I think it's pretty decently covered in the sense that, well, let me actually get to my point here. I think that for the absolute basics of just trying out Sixes for the first time, then it really doesn't matter that much how much you know about Sixes, honestly. Like you could be watching and studying like invite players and how they play and whatnot, and sure that would like help you pick up some decent habits as far as like positioning is concerned and things like that. But overall, most of the early experience most of the early improvement in Sixes, in my opinion, is just through sheer exposure and experience. Because if you play your first ever match or scrim or pug or whatever in a Sixes setting, then you are guaranteed going to be kind of lost. And that happens without fail pretty much. And that's totally fine, because there's a lot of things to get used to if you've only ever played the game casually. For example, actually, being adjusted to the team sizes, being adjusted to the pace of the game and the speed overall, being adjusted to maybe the maps and game modes if you aren't too keen on playing 5CP or Koth otherwise. You have to get used to actually being in a server and communicating with other people. And remember, communication is a two-way street. It's not just about saying what you're doing, which in and of itself, is a skill that sometimes needs practicing, is being able to communicate your intention and what you're doing and what's important information coming from your screen that your teammates might like to know. But it is also really important to be listening to others so that you can actually hear what someone else is saying and respond in a way to accommodate that, whether it be your flank partner is taking a fight that you can then go turn into an advantageous 2v1 for your team, or you're a pocket scout and your demo calls a lot of damage on a specific player, you can go focus them and secure that kill. Things like this, where communication is not just about what you're saying, but also what you're hearing and how you respond to it. But anyway, communication is a skill that needs practicing, and there's no other way to practice than just through sheer exposure. On top of the fact that, like, yes, you can know in theory about Ubers and how they're supposed to work, such as like being passive when it's disad and not being caught to an Uber, as well as like taking an Uber with that and things like this. But you're not going to really internalize that until you've been caught to a bunch of Ubers when you're on disad and you start to be like, oh, okay, I see. So as far as like, for example, my learning experience with Sixes, I definitely did a lot of like outside, just kind of paying attention. I know Habib had one or two videos specifically talking about demo, which I'll come back to like class selection and stuff in a moment. But I would watch that. I was a Banny subscriber at the time and just would try and watch Banny and pay attention to what he's doing. So there was definitely stuff out of the game where I'm paying attention to Sixes and kind of trying to immerse myself in it and pay attention to what's going on. But I think most of the actual improvement was just through sheer exposure, because I was playing a lot of actually Face It hosted TF2 Pugs at the time, for those who might not have known. little weird, but whatever. I just played a ton of those, and that's where I started, picking up on where players are going to be positioned, roughly speaking, at different times, as well as like kind of internalize that Uber counter. So it's a lot easier to expect when it might be disad or something. Just things like that happen through sheer exposure. Am I going to return to class select? I don't know if I will. Just pick whatever class you want. It really doesn't matter. They're all fun. Whatever. All that is to say that at a absolute beginner level, I think just exposure and experience is the thing that actually matters the most. And outside resources, while certainly helpful, I think are more an accessory than anything. But that being said, once you're kind of past that, once you're comfortable in this setting, and once you're comfortable, communicating, once you're comfortable playing your class, generally speaking, and you want more at that point, that's kind of the where I think Sixes communities generally fail, because the accessibility of information is not that great for like an intermediate to more advanced level. And when I say intermediate to advanced, I mean in general terms, not like RGL division terms. That's where I think there's a little more failure. Because for instance, the number of times that I have linked people Eric, as in Froyotech Eric's Flank Scout video, which is a fantastic resource for just like a very clear and there's other adjectives I'm failing on, but it's a very succinct, very clear kind of guide about a Flank Scout's general role in Sixes, which is a fantastic resource for someone kind of at that level. But the number of times I have to link it to people because, it's just not, it's not as publicly available, and it's not something that you would really know to look for, even though it's such a fantastic resource. And that's kind of a difficult problem to solve, honestly, because you just have all these talented players and that are all making their own resources, videos, guides, whatnot, but they're all kind of scattered, which makes it a little difficult to approach. You kind of already have to know a guy who knows about this thing that can send it to you, which makes things a little more difficult. And of course, my channel only contributes to that problem, doesn't alleviate it whatsoever. But I know that, I think it's demoreview.tf is the site, is aiming to be kind of an aggregate for those resources, which I think is a really nice thing. But overall, it's kind of difficult. So another thing I should talk about is that in Sixes, there is a big culture of mentoring and coaching, I guess, where teams that are serious about improving will not only like play a lot and be serious about how they play, but also review a lot, as in do map reviews, do demo reviews, as well as get mentors, either a team mentor to talk about sort of team cohesion and decisions and stuff like that, as well as some players will get individual mentors to review POV demos, and talk about an individual player's positioning, decision making, stuff like that, which I think is fantastic. But again, a lot of people just don't really know where to look because there aren't really any things in place that are convenient for people finding mentors. Some things have been tried, or some this word salad. There are some avenues that have been attempted. There are like looking for mentor things, but it's usually a little tougher than that because even people who are willing to mentor people very rarely like advertise that fact and go out of their way. It's more like you kind of have to ask them. So a lot of the time finding a mentor, it really is just about asking someone. But I want to talk a bit more about that process, because I do think that some people try to find like the best player they can to mentor them, which, while yes, like a high invite player is going to have a lot better advice or more specific advice to give than maybe like a main player if you are, for example, a newcomer or something, or amateur. While that is certainly the case, I do think that for the newcomer player looking for a mentor, a main player will give you 95% of the exact same advice as the invite player. Because if you want to think about kind of the meta game and learning the game in layers, an invite player will have absolutely nuanced and detailed and fantastic opinions about, how you want to position to play like a DZ situation where the other team's down a soldier, for example. They can talk about like flank shoves and the nuances thereof, and all sorts of different things for this specific situation, sure. But if you're just at a baseline level getting caught to these Ubers and failing your team's positioning on a fundamental level, then none of that nuance that they, have a grasp on is going to matter whatsoever, because the advice is like, okay, well, just don't be caught to this Uber. And that's something that the main player will be able to tell you with the same certainty and the same amount of detail. So I do think that it's perfectly serviceable to get a mentor who's just like a couple divisions above. And as far as the process of finding a mentor, just kind of pay attention to the scene, see, who's playing, and see someone who might be playing on a strong team in a couple divisions above you, and just ask them. Because a lot of people are willing to like look over a demo or do a demo review, every week even, or something like that, without necessarily advertising that fact. Now, of course, be polite and whatnot. Not everyone's schedule allows for that, but it really doesn't hurt whatsoever to ask. And I think that's usually a good way to go about it, rather than just try and find the strongest player you can to give you what, a player way worse than them would be able to tell you anyway, I guess. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? I'm trying to think. No, I don't know if there is. I do think that, once you kind of cross that threshold where just getting gameplay in and just getting experience starts to have diminishing returns, there is a bit of a gap in gaining new knowledge and improving at sixes that mentoring is usually kind of a gap for, as well as just, assorted random videos here and there that do a admittedly quite good job of covering whatever topics they may try and cover. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. I know this is very sixes specific. I'm sure my casual audience are wonderfully fast asleep, which is totally fine. But anyway, I will see you all next time.